Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Second Korea Peacekeeping Forum for Women's Empowerment. My name is Ajong Lee. I'm leading the External Relations and the Women, Peace and Security team here at the UN Women's Center of Excellence for Gender Equality in the Republic of Korea. It's my privilege and honor to serve you as the Master of Ceremony today. I know some of you actually attended our inaugural forum last year. I know many of you, so thank you so much for coming again and to show your support to this important agenda. Last night we had quite a bit of rain, and I know that many of you, it took hours to get home, but look at the clear sky and the nice weather. It reminds me of the saying that the night might be long, but the morning always comes. The morning always comes. So I think this is a great sign that we have today. 안녕하십니까. 제2차 여성 평화유지군 포럼에 오신 여러분을 환영합니다. 저는 유엔 여성기구에서 일하고 있는 이하정 대외협력 팀장이라고 합니다. 오늘 사회를 맡게 되어서 영광입니다. 오늘 행사는 외국인이 많은 관계로 저희가 부득이하게 영어로 진행을 하게 되었음을 양해해 주시고요. 저희가 오늘 동시통역이 준비되어 있습니다. 저기 뒤편에 보시면 저희 동시통역사들을 저희가 아주 훌륭하신 분들을 모셨고요. 그분들께서 오늘 통역을 잘하기 위해서 정말 많은 준비를 해오셨습니다. 통역사들의 노고를 생각하셔서 꼭 통역기를 착용해 주시기 바랍니다. 통역기가 혹시라도 없으신 분은 지금 손을 드시면 저희가 준비해 드리도록 하겠습니다. 한국어는 1번입니다. 영어를 잘하시는 분들께서도 통역기를 사용하여 주셔야지 저희가 또 통역을 하는 의미가 있으니까요. 꼭 사용해 주시길 부탁드립니다. So simultaneous Korean and English interpretation is provided throughout the event. So please kindly use your device. English is English is channel 2. Now, among the participants today, ladies and gentlemen, we have 22 women military officers from 13 countries from the Asia-Pacific region who just completed the Uniformed Women Peacekeepers Training, UWPT, which took place in Korea for the past two and a half weeks. May I please ask the trainees to raise your hands just to show that you are here? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, please. This is the next generation of women peacekeepers. So now we'll start with an official message of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that was delivered on the occasion of the International Day of UN Peacekeepers on 29 of May this year.
Today we pay tribute to the more than 76,000 United Nations peacekeepers who embody humanity's highest ideal, peace. Hailing from over 120 countries, our Blue Helmets serve in 11 peace operations in conflict-affected areas in Africa, Asia, Europe and the Middle East. Day in and day out, at great personal risk, these women and men bravely work in some of the most dangerous and unstable places on earth to protect civilians, uphold human rights, support elections and strengthen institutions. They are part of a long tradition. For over 75 years, United Nations peacekeepers have supported communities rocked by conflict and upheaval across 71 missions. More than 4,300 have paid the ultimate price while serving under the UN flag. We will never forget them. In order for our peacekeepers to respond to the challenges of today and tomorrow, they need the world's support. September Summit of the Future will be a moment for countries to carry ideas forward through a new agenda for peace, which links peacekeeping with all efforts to prevent and end conflict. Achieving peace takes hard work. On this important day and every day, let's recommit to supporting those who work for peace, the UN peacekeepers.
Probably not many of you knew the fact that there was an International Day of UN Peacekeepers. So from now on, 29th of May, please kindly remember the sacrifices and the service that were provided by the UN Peacekeepers. Now, without further ado, I'd like to invite Dr. Lee Jung-shim, the Director of the UN Women's Center of Excellence, to kindly open the forum.
Director General 이승범, RK Ministry of National Defense, Kim Young-ho, Vice President of Korea National Defense University, Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, and partners. On behalf of UN Women, it is my great honor to open the Second Korea Peacekeeping Forum for Women's Empowerment. In partnership with the Ministry of National Defense and the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, I warmly welcome all military participants, women and men, both Korean and international, whose dedicated service has kept our nations and the international community safe and secure. War, conflict, terrorism, and extremism have a devastating impact on women and girls. Yet women worldwide are leading peace movements and rebuilding communities. Evidence shows women's participation in peace processes contributes to more durable and resilient peace. However, women continue to be largely excluded from formal peace processes and negotiations. In 2000, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 1325, linking gender equality to international peace and security. Since then, 9 additional resolutions have reinforced the Women, Peace and Security WPS agenda, which is now a central pillar of the UN Security Council's work. Globally, UN Women leads WPS implementation through capacity building, advocacy, and data collection. Since its opening in November 2022, the UN Women Center of Excellence for Gender Equality in Seoul has made the WPS one of the key priorities. In partnership with the Korean Ministry of National Defense, Korea National Defense University, and the Peacekeeping Operations Center, we have supported training women officers from the Asia-Pacific region and convened the Korea Peacekeeping Forum for Women's Empowerment for 2 consecutive years. Last year, former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon attended and delivered the keynote speech, underscoring the significance of the WPS agenda to him and to the global community. This agenda holds even greater importance for Republic of Korea, especially as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. Ladies and gentlemen, despite these efforts and commitments, the statistics remind us that women remain underrepresented in peacekeeping. As of 2020, women constituted only 4.8% of military contingents, 10.9% of uniformed police units, and 34% of justice and corrections personnel in UN peacekeeping missions. These numbers highlight the gap we must address to fully realize the potential of women in peacekeeping roles. We have organized today's forum as part of our efforts to bridge this gap. Today's distinguished speakers with extensive experience in military service and peace operations will share valuable insights and real-life stories about the challenges women peacekeepers face and the steps needed to create an environment where more women can thrive, advance, and contribute fully. I hope you leave today with a clear understanding and a firm commitment to advancing the WPS agenda. In closing, I would like to thank the Ministry of National Defense, Korea National Defense University, and the PKO Center for their partnership. I also extend my thanks to our UN Women headquarters and the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family for their support in advancing our center's WPS efforts. Last but not least, let us remember today's discussions are not just about women's issues. Attracting, nurturing, and retaining women's talent in military and peace operations is critical to the effectiveness and the success of the missions, military missions. How we support and value all individuals, particularly those in underrepresented groups, reflects our institutional strength and future potential. Your presence today is deeply valued, and I especially thank the men leaders here for their support of this important agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee, for your opening remarks. Next, it's my great honor to invite Mr. Lee Seung-bum, Director General for International Policy from the Ministry of National Defense of the Republic of Korea, to deliver his welcoming remarks as the co-host of today's forum. Director General Lee has been a strong supporter for this initiative, a self-declared he for she, I remember from last year's forum. So we are very grateful for his kind support. Director General.
Very good morning. Hello, everyone. I just introduced. My name is Seung-bum Lee. I feel honored to be standing on this podium representing the Korean government. Earlier this week, my team came to my office, and my team, who are now in this room with me, they presented me a speech draft, which was 10-page long. And which contains a lot of amazing content. But after I saw the program, I found that great speakers and great speeches scheduled following my opening remarks. So I thought to myself, I had better minimize the length of my speech so that we can have more time to listen to the great speeches. I'd like to first share my appreciations to Dr. Lee Jong-shin 박사님 and Professor Kim Hyung-ho and all those great speakers and distinguished ambassadors and defense attaches, all the participants to this forum. I'd like to also express my sincere gratitude to all participants, including UN Women Peacekeepers and also the Military Academy, ROTC cadets, who took time to attend the forum despite your busy schedule. The second UN Women Peacekeepers Forum I believe, is a meaningful event co-hosted by the ROC-MND, the Ministry of Gender, Equality and Family, and UN Women, which aims to contribute to the capacity building of female UN peacekeepers and the expansion of their participations to PKO activities. The ROK government has been fully committed to promoting the WPS agendas in Korea and the international community. The ROK MND will continue to make greater effort to expand the participation of women officers in PKO activities and to cultivate PKO experts. Throughout the years, women peacekeepers have played a significant role in civilian protections by direct engagement with the most vulnerable groups, which is the women and children, at the front line of missions. All women peacekeepers in this forum are the real living witness and heroes. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this forum will create another avenue where we not only strengthen women's role in peacekeeping operations, but also so we can promote public awareness of the women's leadership for global peace. Again, thanks everyone for taking part in today's event. And I look forward to another great success in our endeavor to maximize women's roles in the global peacekeeping. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Director General Lee. UN Women is very grateful to have such wonderful partnership with the government of the Republic of Korea. So we sincerely thank you for your kind support. Ladies and gentlemen, next we have the congratulatory speech. Originally, Lieutenant General Im Gi-woon was supposed to deliver the congratulatory remarks, but he was tied up with a very urgent task at the very last minute. So he sent his regrets and he cannot be with us today. Hence, we have the pleasure of having Dr. Kim Young-ho, the Vice President of the Korea National Defense University, to most kindly deliver his speech. Dr. Kim is a renowned scholar and policy expert in the area of international politics and diplomacy, as well as the Korea-US relations. He has advised the President's Office, the National Assembly, Ministry of Unification, as well as the Ministry of National Defense. Dr. Kim, we are honored to have you with us.
Good morning, everybody. As you introduced, I'm Professor Young-ho Kim, Vice President of the Korea National Defense University. Like as explained by the Ms. Lee, our president cannot be here today, so I'm here on behalf of him. He has some other urgent matters came up, so he couldn't make it. So he feels very sorry about it, and he asked for your kind understanding of it. So I'm not as smart as Director General Lee, so I cannot summarize and shorten my prepared address into the that shorter version. But anyway, it's only 5 pages, so I can read it anyway. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to congratulate wholeheartedly on holding the Second Korea Peacekeeping Forum for Women's Empowerment. For that, I want to express my deepest gratitude to Jung-Sim Lee, Director of UN Women's Center of Excellence for Gender Equality, and also Director General Sung-Bum Lee, Bureau of International Policy of Ministry of National Defense. I also appreciate dearly the ambassadors and defense attaches, forum speakers, and all participants of the Uniformed Women Peacekeepers training, and the other guests for being today here. This forum is co-hosted by the ROK Ministry of National Defense and the UN Women's Center of Excellence for Gender Equality. It is, as mentioned by the Director Dr. Lee and also the Director General Lee Sung-bum, is a very meaningful event that finalizes and completes the past 3 weeks long program that the 22 uniformed women peacekeepers have studied and learned about the roles in their future UN missions. At the same time, it is a proof that shows South Korea's strong and continuous commitment to the UN peacekeeping operations, and also its fulfillment of a pledge to capacity building of women peacekeepers. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, these days, as uncertainty of international security dynamics increases, UN peacekeeping operations are also carried out in a very complex and multidimensional security environments. As a result, the risks on civilians, particularly women and children, in conflict areas are continuously increased and demand far more proactive protecting measures for them. This means an active implementation of UN Security Council's Resolution number 1325 on women, peace, and security, and also the peacekeeping operations prioritizing protection of civilians become far more important than ever. In this situation, it is women peacekeepers who can play a key role in building and maintaining trust with vulnerable local people in conflict areas through close communications and warm care for them. Thus, empowering women peacekeepers to carry out such tasks more effectively is imperative and essential to successful accomplishment of peacekeeping operations. For the very empowerment of women peacekeepers, KNDU, our university, has conducted capacity building programs for women officers in close partnership with the UN Women's Center of Excellence for Gender Equality since last year. This year, our university, KNDU, hosts the Empowering Program jointly with the UN Women's Center and also Peacekeeping Operations Training Center of Australia. This is why we call the relationship between South Korea and Austria has grown into a comprehensive strategic partnership. I suppose and hope that the past 3 weeks long program and the accommodation offered by our university were pleasant and enjoyable to our participants, 22 participants, and also it would provide the participating officers, women officers, with a meaningful opportunity not only to gain and advance their knowledge and skills for their future UN missions, but also to enhance understanding of and friendship with many other officers participating in the program. In addition, I'm sure that the three speakers' presentation today, talking about their valuable experiences and knowledge, will be very conducive to forming a firm foundation and consensus on the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in UN peacekeeping missions. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, I believe that Republic of Korea will continue to participate actively in UN peacekeeping operations to fulfill our due share as a responsible member of the international community. And I cordially ask for your continuing support and interest in UN peacekeeping operations so that they can further promote global peace and prosperity. Once again, I would like to thank deeply the Ministry of National Defense and the UN Center of Excellence for Gender Equality for organizing today's forum. And I wish everyone here all the best and happiness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for your congratulatory remarks. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a photo shoot so that we can remember today. This room is entirely full, actually, so thank you so much for all your time. Given that we have over 130 people present in this room, it's impossible to ask everyone to come to the front. So we'll take a group photo from the front, facing you basically first, so that we can capture everybody. Then we'll also ask some distinguished guests to kindly to come forward and then take the photos. Now I'm going to ask my colleague Zoe to kindly lead the photo session.
So we will now take 3 rounds of group photos. For the first round, please remain seated as Ajong said. The photographer will take a picture from the stage. If you're seated on the side, the left, would you please kindly move to the center so that you can be included in the photo. I ask for your cooperation. Sorry for the inconvenience. If you're seated on the side table, you would not be included in the photo, so would you please kindly move to the center, extended? Sorry for the inconvenience. So we'll count 1, 2, 3, and smile. Okay. 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you. For the second round, we kindly ask those seated at table number 1, 2, and 3 in the front row to come up to the stage for the photo. For the second round, we kindly ask those seated at table 1, 2, and 3 in the front row to come up to the stage for the photo. For the 11 organizers and generals with assigned seats, please follow the staff's guidance. 2 photos will be taken while you remain seated in your assigned position. For the final round, we kindly ask those seated at table number 4, 5, 6, 8, and 7, table number 4, 5, 6, and 7 to proceed to the stage for the group photo. Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you everyone for your kind patience with the photos. We'll be sharing the photo with everyone who participated in this forum, so you will be receiving the photos via email from us within the next few days. 이거 빨리 가져가. So now we'll begin our speeches, which is the highlight of today's forum. So next, I'm going to first invite Commander Tyson Nicholas, my good friend and colleague from UN Women New York headquarters. He's our strategic military advisor. He's been seconded by the Australian Defence Force to this position. In his 25-year military career, Tyson has served in various leadership and staff positions and deployed operationally on counter-violent extremism operations in the Middle East, combat operations with Australia, NATO, and US forces in Afghanistan, peacekeeping with the UN mission in South Sudan, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations in the South Pacific, as well as in the Indo-Pacific. So he has wealth of experience, and he's leading UN Women's work on WPS in New York. So it's my great privilege and pleasure to have him with us. So ladies and gentlemen, please kindly welcome Tyson Nicholas.
A good day, everyone, and thank you to the UN Women's Centre of Excellence, the Ministry of National Defence, and the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family for inviting me to speak today. I want to start by sharing a story from my time in the UN mission as a peacekeeper deployed to South Sudan. It's a difficult story to tell, but it's one that must be heard if we are truly to understand the human cost of conflict and the critical importance of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Her name was Mary. First, they killed her husband. Then the soldiers killed her 2 sons, aged 5 and 7. When the uniformed men yanked her daughter from her arms next, Mary didn't think it could get any worse. 5 of them held her down, and she was forced to watch as the 3 others raped her 10-year-old daughter, Nylat. Mary said, "I couldn't even see my little girl anymore. I could only see blood." Nylat died a few hours later, and Mary said, "I wanted to die too." This is a story of unbelievable and unbearable loss and unimaginable violence. But it's also a story that illustrates why we need the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Mary and Nylat were not combatants or participating in hostilities. They were civilians entitled to protection, targeted because of their gender. Gender equality is not a social justice issue, it's a peace and security issue. Put another way, gender inequality is a threat to peace and security. When we ignore the voices of women in conflict, when we fail to protect them, when we accept discrimination and gender inequalities, we are exposing half the population to situations of sexual and gender-based violence, situations of vulnerability, to oppression and discrimination on the basis of their gender, and we are failing to build sustainable peace. The Women, Peace and Security Agenda, or WPS, was formalised in 2000 with the UN Security Council's landmark resolution 1325. And so next year will be the 25th anniversary of that resolution. This resolution acknowledges the disproportionate impacts of conflict on women and girls, stories like Mary's and Nylat's, and calls for their full, equal and meaningful participation in peace-building efforts. It's about recognising that women are not just victim survivors of conflict, they are powerful agents for peace. When we empower women, when we strengthen communities, we lay the foundation for a more peaceful future. In 2020, at the annual debate on women, peace and security at the UN Security Council, my boss, the Secretary General Antonio Guterres, said, "Gender equality is first and foremost a question of power. Wherever we look, power structures are dominated by men." In 2023, he expanded on this perspective in his new Agenda for Peace, emphasising the influence of patriarchal structures. He called on the UN system and member states to collectively address and dismantle these structures and prevent conflict and promote peace. He also emphasised the need to include the perspectives of women affected by discrimination, marginalisation, and violence that contributed to gender inequality. The Secretary-General's message underscores that gender inequality is a systemic issue and that cannot be resolved merely by increasing the number of women or adding them to existing structures. Challenging these gendered power structures is crucial for modern peace operations and for modern militaries. In my 25 years of military service, I've seen firsthand the difference that gender-responsive peacekeeping makes. During my deployment to the UN mission in South Sudan, we worked to involve women from local community in security discussions. These women offered insights none of the men, local or foreign, could provide, shaping our strategy in ways that improve both our relationships and mission effectiveness. This is the essence of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. It's not just about protecting women, it's about their full, equal and meaningful participation and ensuring they are active participants in establishing and sustaining peace and security. Doing so makes our operations more effective and our missions more successful. Operationalising Women, Peace and Security also means providing peacekeepers, both men and women, with the tools and training they need to understand the differential and disproportionate impacts and security concerns of women and girls and men and boys in conflict. This ensures that peace operations are responsive to the needs of the entire population. As a man, I want to emphasise gender equality is not a women's issue. It's a mission for all of us. Men have a crucial role in championing gender equality and ensuring that women, peace and security is integrated into our organisations and our operations. We must recognise the power of gender-inclusive approaches and gender-responsive leadership. We must recognise that diverse teams perform better, and that the empowerment of women is key to mission success. As men, we cannot remain silent. We have a responsibility to actively support pushing forward this agenda. Silence is complicity. Gender equality doesn't just benefit women, it benefits everyone. When women have access to resources, education, and decision-making, societies are more stable, economies are stronger, and peace is more enduring. The world is a more peaceful, prosperous, and just world when women are empowered and gender equality is realised. Stories like Mary's are painful reminders of the cost of inaction, but they also remind us of why we must continue to fight for gender equality in every space, from boardrooms to battlefields. Gender-balanced forces are more effective in building trust with local communities, especially in cultures with specific gender norms. Women peacekeepers gain access to parts of the population that men cannot, and allowing for a more holistic and effective peace-building effects. So what can we do? First, we can push for the full, equal and meaningful participation of women at every level of peace and security processes. It's not enough to simply acknowledge the need, we need to take concrete actions. Second, men need to step up. This isn't about giving up power, it's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Finally, each of us, whether in uniform or not, can be an advocate for this mission. To truly operationalise women, peace and security, we must commit to integrating gender perspectives at every level, from the strategic level to the operational level to the tactical level. This requires training, accountability, and the willingness to challenge entrenched norms that have previously sidelined women. Gender equality is not just a women's issue, it's a mission for all of us, and it's a mission we cannot afford to fail.
For your powerful speech. We'll have a little bit more chance to hear from Tyson during the discussion time, ladies and gentlemen. Now, it's my great privilege and honor to invite Ms. Jen Whitworth. She is a renowned women, peace and security expert worldwide. She was the first Australian Defence Force gender advisor to NATO operations in Afghanistan in 2013. And Jen also led the implementation of the Australian National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security from 2013 to 16. And she was the inaugural military advisor to UN Women in New York. And she worked also with the UN Women in various countries as well. So Jen, it's my great privilege and honor to have you with us as an expert.
Thank you, Ajung. And can I just ask, how do I switch the slides on this? So, well, good morning, and thank you to UN Women Centre of Excellence and the Ministry of National Defence and the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family for inviting me to speak today. And I'd really specifically like to acknowledge and thank UN Women for their tireless support for progressing gender equality within the Republic of Korea defence and security sector. I'd also like to acknowledge the points made by Commander Tyson in his presentation on the importance of gender equality in peace and security efforts and the role of women as active participants in creating peace. And notably, that their inclusion in conflict prevention and response makes military operations and missions more effective and successful. And while Tyson spoke more broadly to the gendered nature of conflict and its impact on women and girls, I want to speak to what the Women, Peace and Security agenda means to uniformed women in the security sector. But first, I just want to share some sentiments surrounding the recent sinking of Her Majesty's New Zealand ship Manu Wanui, and I hope for my New Zealand colleagues in the room that I said that correctly, off the coast of Samoa just recently. And you may have heard that the ship's commanding officer since 2022, Commander Yvonne Gray, was a woman with 30 years of naval experience, and she safely evacuated the ship's company without any injuries or death. And while the circumstances surrounding the sinking of this ship will, of course, be subject to an inquiry in due course, the Court of Public Opinion has already judged Commander Gray. Reports of gender-based attacks on her competence and leadership have emerged. She's been personally trolled on social media, and this has led to abusive comments towards other uniformed women in the streets of New Zealand. Critics accuse Gray of being appointed to her role due to her gender rather than her qualifications. And quite rightly, New Zealand's Defence Minister has publicly defended Gray, saying the one thing that we know did not cause the sinking of the ship is the gender of the ship's captain. Now, sadly, these gender-based attacks stem from the very tightly held traditional views of women's roles in society. And comments about her competency and an appointment based on gender rather than merit are an attack on the professionalism and the training standards of the military. And what they're suggesting is that the appointment of a less qualified or less competent officer just because she's a woman. Now, this kind of commentary fuels the view that women cannot do the roles that were once held exclusively by men. It also suggests that standards are lowered for women, and nothing can be further from the truth. I speak from experience as having served as a senior officer on a naval warship that all personnel at sea are trained to the same exacting standards regardless of gender, and that no leniency is given to women just because once upon a time they were unable to serve in combat roles. And there is no doubt that Commander Gray, who served in both the United Kingdom and the New Zealand Navy, has had the same warfare training and experience as her male colleagues, and that she was appointed to her commanding officer's role on merit and on equal terms with her male colleagues. And to suggest otherwise diminishes not only the efforts and progress of gender equality more broadly, but the efforts and progress of advancing women's equal participation in our armed forces. On a brighter note, we can take delight and rejoice in the fact that in New Zealand, both the Chief of Army and the Defence Minister are women, and both earned their right to be appointed to these roles. Both women are in these roles because of their equal access to opportunities, power, and resources. But not all uniformed women are in this position. Globally, armed forces are at various stages in the gender equality journey, with some quite advanced, as with New Zealand, others where women remain relegated to safe and less demanding roles because of traditional gender-based views and attitudes on the abilities of women. What this situation reveals is that gendered power structures and dynamics that compromise progress on gender equality and limit women's participation on an equal footing with men prevails in armed forces and peace operations. So firstly, let me define gendered power structures and dynamics. Well, quite simply, they refer to the systems and hierarchies within our institutions that are organised and maintained based on gender norms and in the ways in which power is distributed and exercised between genders. And gender norms dictate the behaviours and roles that are considered appropriate for individuals based on their perceived gender. These structures and dynamics are influenced by cultural, social, economic and political factors. They shape the roles, behaviours and opportunities available to individuals based on their gender. And they are, of course, historical, based on times when only men worked outside the home and provided for their families. And while time has moved on, these behaviours and attitudes have not. These gendered power structures and dynamics manifest in the military in several ways. First, they prioritise aggressive behaviour, emotional suppression, and physical endurance as the key measure of military capability, which sidelines other vital skills. Second, they reinforce traditional gender roles, assigning women to support or administrative positions while reserving combat and leadership roles for men. And this undervalues women's contributions and excludes them from key missions and decision-making. And compounding this expectation is that women should prioritise family and caregiving responsibilities over their military careers. And this undermines their career ambitions and their financial independence. Third, they foster a hostile work environment that's marked by widespread sexual harassment and discriminatory behaviour towards women and other marginalised groups. Fourth, they undermine women leaders' authority by subjecting them to greater scrutiny and harsher evaluations than men, forcing women to work harder to prove their capability. And finally, they cause resistance to policies and initiatives aimed at integrating women into all aspects of military operations and leadership, with some viewing these efforts as a threat to traditional military values. So constant exposure to these structures and dynamics can undermine women's confidence and self-esteem, making it harder for them to assert themselves and pursue leadership roles. And it's this important aspect of military service that underpinned the development of the Women's Military Peace Operations course, which is a collaborative training program between the Department of Peace Operations and UN Women, headquarters in New York, which was piloted here in Seoul last year. This course includes the standard UN training for staff officers or military observers, as well as a week-long module on leadership, empowerment and networking to empower women in their leadership roles. In military contexts, gender power structures and dynamics not only perpetuate gender inequality, but they also undermine the effectiveness, cohesion, and ethical standards of the armed forces. So challenging these manifestations is essential for creating an environment where all personnel, regardless of gender, can contribute fully and equally to the mission. Let me share some examples of how gendered power structures and dynamics affect women in armed forces and peace operations. There is a strong protection ethos among senior male leaders in mission that prevents women peacekeepers from leaving base and thus interferes with their capacity to carry out their duties equally with their male colleagues. Uniformed women are still required to use personal protective equipment that is designed for standard masculine body types, which is not suitable for them to use safely. There is often unequal accommodations for sleeping or bathing on base, or they're difficult to access, which impacts women's safety moving between the accommodations. There are high rates of sexual assault and harassment faced by women in the military and in peace operations, and many armed forces still do not have policies in place to prevent and respond to these issues. Women peacekeepers are often perceived as women first, soldiers second. This can lead to the siloing of women into softer, safer roles, such as community engagement, rather than in their primary role. And finally, there's a perception that women bring their gender to military contexts, which undermines their professional identity as a military officer, and they're often treated with disrespect regardless of rank. Now, there are too many more examples to share here today, but I think these few demonstrate the pervasive influence of gendered dynamics in military operations and in the treatment of uniformed women. These ongoing dynamics are leadership failures. In the words of a male colleague of mine, they are a violation of a woman's right to deploy, not a reason to avoid deploying women. These examples show why gender mainstreaming as a strategy to counter the effects of these gendered power structures and dynamics is needed in the context of peace operations and armed forces. Gender mainstreaming integrates gender considerations into all policies, programs and operations to ensure equal benefits for women and men. It promotes equal recruitment, training and advancement opportunities while also addressing gender-specific challenges. Now, I emphasise that gender mainstreaming must go beyond the tokenistic representation of women, especially in terms of just increasing the numbers. It must strive for substantive equality where women's leadership, skills and perspectives are valued and utilised to shape more effective and inclusive security outcomes. And I would like to be clear here that gender mainstreaming is not about fixing women, but rather about the institutional and organisational culture shift needed to accept the diversity that women bring. That is, how can military institutions value women's leadership styles and strengths in all contexts, at home and on operations. Now, historically, military institutions, of course, have been traditionally male-dominated, with women largely excluded from formal combat and leadership positions. Despite this exclusion, women have contributed to military efforts throughout history, often in support roles. During times of war, Women served as nurses, medics, spies, and in logistics and communications. Now, while critical to the war effort, these roles were typically viewed as peripheral and not recognised in the same way as combat duties. By the late 20th century, societal shifts and the growing need for military personnel led many nations to gradually increase the formal integration of women into the armed forces. However, women often faced significant resistance as traditional military cultures viewed their presence as disruptive to the institution's masculine identity. Many countries have maintained policies barring women from direct combat roles based on arguments related to physical capabilities, unit cohesion, and the perception that women need protection. And this has further restricted women's opportunities for promotion to senior ranks, where combat experience is often a prerequisite for leadership positions. In recent decades, many military institutions have recognised the capabilities and contributions of women, leading to significant policy changes. From the 1990s, countries such as Canada, Norway and Australia began to open combat and combat-related roles to women. In 2013, the United States formally lifted the ban on women serving in combat roles, following the acknowledgement that women were already engaging in combat situations in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And the British military officially removed all restrictions on women serving in any combat role in 2020. I also note the Republic of Korea's 2021 National Defence White Paper references the need to increase the female military workforce and pursue policies to open previously restricted specialties such as artillery, air defence and intelligence to women. So it has been slow progress globally to remove these restrictions, and it hasn't been easy. As I mentioned previously, I served as one of the senior officers of an Australian warship, Her Majesty's Australian ship Swan, in the mid-1990s, and this was due to the Australian government lifting the gender restrictions on combat-related roles. I was the senior logistics officer, and even though I hadn't previously served at sea as a junior officer, I had completed the same training and attained similar experience in shore roles to my male colleagues. This is me with the other officers. I don't know if you can see very clearly, I'm to the right of the gentleman in the middle, in the back row, one woman in the officers' mess of all men. And I was only one of 2 women in a crew of 212. And now this was, 28 years ago, but unfortunately it's still a common occurrence today to see women in such a minority. So being one of a minority was very difficult. It was very isolating. I faced gender-based attitudes, comments, and even violence from men merely because I was a woman in a job that they felt belonged to men. And of course it was a new experience, a different experience for everyone, and it really challenged the gendered norms of the time. And they said women couldn't do it, they said we were not capable, but we did, and we didn't fail. And it's really from these humble beginnings that women, like New Zealand's Commander Grey, Chief of Army and Defence Minister, have sprung. And it's from these humble beginnings that gender equality for uniformed women began. Now, these changes have been largely driven by certain factors, not the least global advocacy, commitments and legislation on gender equality, which provide for the equal right of uniformed women to serve alongside men. But as a central factor for militaries, the evolving and gendered nature of modern conflicts and warfare, where women are disproportionately affected, as Tyson pointed out, necessitates the need for more diverse forces to be deployed to peace operations to address the diverse security needs and concerns of the civilian populations. Traditional military strategies based on large-scale state-on-state warfare are increasingly being replaced by asymmetric warfare, including insurgencies, terrorism, cyber warfare, and hybrid threats. And they often take place in urban environments with civilian populations, where winning the hearts and minds is as important as military victory. Today's armed forces are involved in a variety of roles beyond combat, including humanitarian aid, disaster relief, peace building and stability operations. And these conflicts and responses demand different leadership approaches and different skill sets, such as strategic thinking, risk assessment and technological expertise, areas where women leaders in society more broadly are contributing significantly. And this leads me to share with you where gender mainstreaming has been effectively implemented. The Swedish Armed Forces actively recruit and retain women through targeted measures. Gender equality is embedded in leadership development, and all personnel receive training on gender dynamics and discrimination. The Canadian Armed Forces implemented gender analysis as a policy to assess how policies and programs affect individuals differently based on gender and other identity factors. And the Australian Defence Force have included initiatives to increase women's representation across all roles, enhance career and leadership development, implement targeted recruitment, and addressing sexual misconduct. As we move forward, I urge each of you to take concrete steps within your respective organisations and institutions to challenge the gender power structures and dynamics and promote gender mainstreaming. Embrace the principles of gender equality and inclusion, and commit to creating environments where everyone is respected, valued, and empowered to contribute their best. So to do this requires an institutional shift in culture, behaviours and values. Don't just add women and stir, as Tyson also mentioned previously, and hope that it all works out. But to do this will allow women to advance in the security sector on the same basis as men, to demonstrate their competencies and skills on the same basis as men, and to achieve their full potential on the same basis as men. I would not have had my journey, albeit challenging at various times, as you can imagine, without these progressive and positive changes. Your leadership and actions are crucial in driving meaningful change, but together we can build stronger, more adaptive institutions that reflect the diverse world that we serve and uphold the highest standards of respect and professionalism, and these includes the standards expected of our peacekeepers. So let us take these lessons to heart and act decisively to create a future where gender equality is not just an aspiration, but a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen, for your insightful remarks. I think to see you, especially in these slides, this really brings something very close, very personal. I know there are many young, aspiring military officers present in this room, and I think, Jen, you really shine as an example and a beacon of hope as well. Now, before I introduce my third speaker, we are just going to show a 2-minute clip that demonstrates what women officers do in UN operations.
The role of engagement platoon is very crucial in a critical mission like MONUSCO, where we act as the eyes and ears for our contingent and help them to fulfill the primary mandated task, which is the protection of civilians. My first challenge as an engagement platoon commander was to create a gender-inclusive and a gender-sensitive team, which was well-versed with the history, tradition, and cultures of DRC. Our aim was to gain the trust of our people through regular interaction so that they open up to us about their security and human rights concerns, and we can provide a platform for their voices to be raised to the higher levels. Me and my team conducted various awareness lectures, which include health, education, employment, gender equality, and the role of a woman in decision-making. It is very rewarding for me to see women and young girls come up and say that they feel very happy and empowered when they see a women soldier leading a team comprising of both male and female soldiers, moving amongst them. Being a part of the engagement platoon is more than a day-to-day mission, because we know once we go out, we are being looked upon by each and every member of the society. So irrespective of the conditions we face, we always move out with a happy heart. And we believe that we are the role models for a positive change and a hope for the peace and stability to prevail.
Now, very much linked to this video, now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Lieutenant Colonel Select Lee Sung-yeon. She's currently serving as a military liaison officer in the United Nations Disengagement Observer Force, UNDOF, since November 2023. She has 5 overseas deployments overall. In recognition of her continuous dedication to the peacekeeping efforts of the Republic of Korea, Yi was recently selected for promotion to Lieutenant Colonel, which we very much congratulate her for. She remains deeply committed to advancing the women, peace, and security agenda with a particular focus on gender dynamics and conflict in the Middle East region. So she flew all the way to be with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome
존경하는 유엔 여성기구 성평등센터 이정심 소장님, 국방부 이승범 국방정책관님, 국방대학교 김영호 부총장님, 국군 간호사관학교 정경호 학교장님, 각국의 대사님과 무관님, 그리고 내외 귀빈, 그리고 미래의 여성평화유지군 여러분, 만나뵙게 되어 반갑습니다. 저는 작년 11월부터 현재까지 운도프 유엔 교전중지협정 감시부대 일명 골란고원 임무단에서 연락장교로 임무를 수행하고 있는 육군 소령 이성현입니다. 우선 오늘 이 자리에서 대한민국의 평화유지군과 임무단을 대표할 수 있는 영광스러운 기회를 주신 대한민국의 국방부와 여성가족부, 유엔 여성기구 성평등센터, 그리고 저희 임무단의 지휘부 여러분들 감사드립니다. 더불어 복잡한 정세 때문에 쉽지 않았을 저의 한국행을 도와주신 그 국방대학교의 국제평화활동센터 참모 여러분들께도 감사의 말씀을 전합니다. 저는 중령으로 진급 예정이긴 하지만 여전히 지금 소령 계급장을 달고 있고 여전히 군생활뿐만 아니라 평화유지 활동 분야에서도 배우고 경험할 것이 많이 남아 있습니다. 그래서 오늘 저는 앞에 두 분처럼 전문가로서 뭔가 그 전문적이거나 거창한 얘기를 말씀을 드리는 게 아니라 제가 여성평화유지군 과정의 별도의 참가자이자 현장에 있는 한 사람의 여성평화유지군으로서 저의 과거와 현재 경험을 공유한다는 생각으로 이 자리에 서 있습니다. 먼저 간단하게 제 소개를 드리도록 하겠습니다. 저는 2006년에 육군 정보장교로 임관을 했습니다. 당시에는 제가 이렇게 자주 UN 마크를 달고 이 블루베레를 착용하고 다양한 분쟁 지역에서 활동하게 될 거라고는 전혀 생각도 못했습니다. 다만 그때 막 동명부대 파병을 한국에서 처음으로 시작하고 각종 매체에서 동명부대의 활약상을 보도하고 있었기 때문에 막연하게 언젠가 한 번쯤은 저도 블루베레를 쓰고 임무를 수행하고 싶다라는 희망을 가지고 있었습니다. 감사하게도 2012년 제가 육군 제15보병사단에서 막 그 보병중대장을 맞춰가는 시점에 동명 11진 본부의 참모장교로 선발이 되었고 이것이 저의 첫 파병이었습니다. 물론 그 첫 파병을 통해 많이 배우고 성장했지만 여전히 그때까지도 파병은 제 군생활에서 그때 한 번뿐인 것으로 생각을 했습니다. 특히 그때만 해도 한국군뿐만 아니라 현장에서 여성평화유지군을 찾아보기가 매우 어려웠기 때문에 그냥 군생활에서의 특별하고 의미 있는 1회 경험이라고 생각했습니다. 실제로 제가 처음으로 파병 갔던 동명 11진 약 350여 명 가운데 여군은 저를 포함해서 단 5명 뿐이었습니다. 이 사진 찍을 때 한 명을 저희가 못 찾았는데 지금 5명 모두 잘 성실하게 군생활을 하고 있습니다. 유니필에서의 첫 파병을 마치고 약 1년 후에 놀랄만한 소식을 접했습니다. 존경하는 반기문 전 유엔 사무총장님께서 역사상 처음으로 사이프러스 임무단의 사령관으로 노르웨이의 크리스틴 룬트 장군을 임명을 하신 겁니다. 유엔 PKO 역사상 최초의 여군 사령관이라는 새로운 장이 열린 것입니다. 저는 제 스스로를 어디 인터뷰할 때나 얘기할 때 크리스틴 룬트 키즈라고 부릅니다. 비록 국적은 다르지만 룬트 장군께서는 여성이 PKO에서 어디까지 성장할 수 있는지 어떤 기회가 열려 있는지를 몸소 보여주셨습니다. 그때부터 저는 스스로의 역량을 키우는 한편 계속 PKO에 지원을 해왔습니다. 물론 5번의 파병을 가는 동안 떨어지기는 거의 50번에 가까운 수준이긴 했지만 끝까지 포기하지 않았고 감사하게도 결과적으로 여러 임무를 수행할 수 있는 행운을 얻었습니다. 인도 파키스탄의 운모기 유엔 정전감시단, 레바논 유니필의 서부여단의 참모로 2번째 파병, 남수단의 한빛부대, 그리고 현재의 운도프까지 한국군 여군으로서는 엄청 다양한 경험을 쌓을 수 있었습니다. 이 모든 기회는 유엔 안보리 결의안 1325와 같은 정책적 기반이 있었기에 가능했습니다. 이 결의안은 평화유지 활동에서 여성 참여의 중요성을 강조하며 더 많은 여성들의 PKO 참여를 독려했습니다. 여기에 우리나라 정부와 군의 적극적인 이행 의지가 더해져 큰 변화를 만들어냈습니다. 저는 이러한 정책과 의지의 최대의 수혜자 중 한 명이라고 생각합니다. 참고로 2017년 오른쪽에 보시는 사진에서 제가 동명 21진의 일원으로 레바논에 다시 파병 갈 때는 당시 250여 명의 파병 인원 중에 20명이 여군이었는데 이는 역대 최다 여군 파병 기록이었습니다. 저의 첫 파병인 동명 11진 때와 비교하면 5년 안에 큰 진전을 이룬 것이었습니다. 하지만 이 수치는 여전히 20명 미만 유지되고 있고 여전히 더 많은 발전이 필요합니다. 여기 계신 모든 분들께서는 현재와 과거의 여성평화유지군들이 만들어낸 성과와 필요성에 대해 충분히 이해하고 공감하고 계실 거라고 생각합니다. 2016년부터 매년 유엔 본부에서는 양성평등 관련 업적을 남긴 평화유지군을 선정하여 표창하고 있는데 지금까지의 모든 수상자는 새로운 길을 개척한 뛰어난 여군들이었습니다. 이러한 수상자들은 각자의 임무 수행 과정에서 탁월한 리더십을 보여주었고 지역사회와의 소통을 강화하며 여성의 참여와 권리 신장을 위해 노력했습니다. 그들의 공헌은 평화유지 활동에서의 여성의 역할이 얼마나 중요한지를 잘 보여주는 사례입니다. 또한 다수의 연구를 통해서 양성평등 차원에서 균형이 잘 잡힌 임무단일수록 여러 면에서 더 효과적이라는 것이 입증되었습니다. 여성평화유지군의 존재는 우선 군 내부나 지역사회에서 발생할 수 있는 성폭력 예방이나 성비위행위 방지에 도움이 됩니다. 여성평화유지군이 참여하는 부대에서는 이러한 문제에 대한 인식과 대응이 더욱 효과적일 수 있습니다. 이에 더해 여성평화유지군은 특히 여성과 아동을 포함한 지역사회 구성원들과 더 잘 소통하고 신뢰를 쌓을 수 있습니다. 이는 특히 문화적으로 여성들과의 접촉이 제한된 지역에서 중요한 역할을 하고 있습니다. 더불어 여성평화유지군은 임무 수행 과정에서 다양한 관점을 제공함으로써 보다 포괄적이고 효과적인 평화유지 활동을 가능하게 합니다. 이는 복잡한 갈등 상황을 이해하고 해결하는 데 도움이 됩니다. 이러한 평화유지군의 역할은 단순히 성별의 문제를 넘어 평화유지 활동 전반의 효과성을 높이는 데 기여하고 있습니다. 제가 현재 몸담고 있는 운도프 역시 전체 인원 대비 약 10%, 참모장교의 20%가 여군입니다. 이는 유엔에서 목표로 하고 있는 여성평화유군 20% 달성에는 아직 미치지 못하지만 꾸준히 수치가 증가하고 있습니다. 저희 임무단의 여성평화유지군들은 제한 없이 모든 영역에서 활약하며 현지의 복잡한 상황 속에서도 지역의 안정을 위해 노력하고 있습니다. 이러한 성과와 현장에서 입증된 효과성, 필요성에도 불구하고 여성평화유지군이 넘어야 할 도전들은 여전히 남아 있습니다. 저는 오늘 3가지 주요 과제에 대해서 말씀드리도록 하겠습니다. 여군들이 직면하게 되는 가장 큰 문제는 가정과 파병 임무의 양립입니다. 저는 자주 동료나 선후배들로부터 파병에 대한 조언을 구하는 연락을 받는데 대부분의 동료들은 기혼이고 자녀를 둔 어머니들인지라 결국에는 자녀들에 대한 걱정으로 파병 지원을 포기하곤 했습니다. 특히 어린 자녀가 있는 경우 장기간 떠나 있어야 한다는 생각에 파병을 망설일 수밖에 없습니다. 저보다 영어도 훨씬 잘하고 뛰어난 제 동기 한 명이 있는데 그 친구는 정말 파병을 나오고 싶어 했고 여러 번 지원하려고 했었습니다. 하지만 결국 자신의 파병을 위해서 2 아들과 남편을 한국에 두고 나올 수 없어서 지원 자체를 포기하기도 했습니다. 이는 파병을 생각했을 때 많은 여군들이 가장 크게 고민하는 이유입니다. 저는 사실 오른쪽에 보시는 엄청 귀여운 시로라는 강아지 말고는 다행인지 불행인지 책임질 가족이 없습니다. 그래서 자유롭게 파병 생활을 이어가고 있는데 그럼에도 불구하고 저희 어머니 도움이 없었다면 이 정도로 자유롭게 파병을 지원하고 임무를 수행하기는 어렵지 않았을까 합니다. 강아지 한 마리만으로도 부모님의 도움이 없다면 파병 임무 수행이 거의 불가능한데 자녀가 있는 어머니들의 경우에는 주변의 희생과 도움이 없다면 거의 불가능한 일이 될 것입니다. 작년 포럼에서 발표하셨던 많은 여군 장성분들께서 성공적인 임무 수행에 가족들이 얼마나 중요한 역할을 하셨는지 말씀을 하셨습니다. 군 생활과 파병 생활을 이어가는데 기꺼이 지지와 희생을 아끼지 않은 그분들의 가족에게 감사의 말씀을 꼭 전하셨습니다. 이것이 대부분 여성들이 PKO에 참여할 때 겪게 되는 어려움 중에 하나입니다. 이를 개선하기 위해서는 국내 가족 지원을 위한 프로그램을 강화하고 평화유지 활동 기간 중 가족을 돌보기 위한 좀 더 유연한 휴가 정책을 도입할 필요가 있다고 생각합니다. 이러한 개선을 통해 많은 여성들이 가족을 희생시킨다는 죄책감을 느끼지 않고 PKO에 참여할 수 있는 환경을 조성하는 한편, 이러한 개선은 결국 여성 평화유지군뿐만 아니라 모든 평화유지군의 더 나은 가정생활을 보장함으로써 전반적인 임무 수행 여건을 향상시킬 수 있습니다. 결과적으로 성별과 상관없이 더 많은 유능한 인재들이 PKO를 선택할 수 있게 되어서 PKO 전반의 효과성 또한 높일 수 있을 것이라고 생각합니다. 두 번째 어려움은 불비한 생활 여건입니다. 임무 현장에서의 생활은 당연히 본국의 집에서 출퇴근하는 것과는 다르고 그 자체만으로도 모든 평화유지군에게 어려움을 주고 있습니다. 하지만 특히 여성의 프라이버시나 위생 등과 같은 특정한 필요를 반영하지 못한 시설물들은 여성 평화유지군에게 추가적인 부담으로 다가올 수 있습니다. 제가 근무했던 한 임무단의 초소에서는 방배정 문제로 갈등이 있었습니다. 남군 팀장이 유일한 여군 초소원에게 다른 남군과 방을 공유할 것을 주장해서 문제가 된 것이었습니다. 이를 주장한 그 남군 팀장의 문제라기보다는 기본적으로 가용시설이 제한되는 상황이 이러한 모두에게 불편한 상황을 만들어냈다고 생각합니다. 이러한 사례는 특별한 경우가 아닙니다. 다수의 여성 평화유지군들이 불비한 여건으로 인한 비슷한 문제들을 현장에서 겪고 있습니다. 한편으로 이러한 여성 평화유지군들의 요청이 때로는 다른 남성 평화유지군들에게는 역차별이나 추가적인 부담으로 다가오기도 합니다. 아주 자그마한 예이긴 하지만 여군들이 파병을 갈 때면 6개월에서 8개월 혹은 1년까지 자기가 사용할 위생용품을 준비해서 가고는 하는데 이게 생각보다 부피를 많이 차지합니다. 전세기에 주어진 공간이나 무게는 한정된 가운데 여군들이 추가적인 공간이나 무게를 요청한다면 다른 인원들에게는 역차별로 오해받을 여지가 있고 이에 대한 불평이 제기될 수 있습니다. 물론 여군들도 제한되거나 불비한 여건 속에서 생활할 수 있도록 훈련이 되어 왔기 때문에 남군들과 숙소를 공유한다거나 맨바닥에서 잠을 자고 위생이 열악하거나 위험한 지역에서 다양한 극단적인 상황에서 대처할 수 있고 실제 현장에서 임무를 수행하고 있습니다. 제가 말레이시아에서 만났던 같이 교육을 받았던 태국 동료의 사례를 한번 말씀드리려고 합니다. 이 태국 친구는 남수단에서 옵저버로 임무를 1년간 수행하면서 정말 열악한 곳에서 맨 땅에 텐트를 치고 남군들 가운데 혼자서 생활을 하고 정체모를 벌레들한테 물려가면서 1년간의 임무를 성공적으로 마쳤고 이에 대해 굉장한 자부심을 느끼고 있습니다. 하지만 제가 말씀드리고자 하는 것은 더 많은 여성들이 PKO에 참여하고 이를 지속적인 경력으로 쌓아나가게끔 만들려면 이 환경에 대한 개선이 필수적이라는 점입니다. 이러한 개선이 특히 부대 파병을 준비하는 과정에서는 추가적인 부담으로 다가올 수 있지만 그럼에도 불구하고 여군들을 위한 별도의 시설을 제공하는 것은 필수적이라고 할 수 있습니다. 이와 관련된 최근의 성공적인 사례는 유니필 가나대대에 대한 LC 이니셔티브 프로그램 지원입니다. 이 프로그램을 통해 여군 전용 시설이 마련되었고 이는 여성 평화유지군의 참여를 크게 증가시켰습니다. 여군 시설에 대한 적절한 투자는 임무단에서 여군들이 소속감을 갖게 할 뿐만 아니라 더 적극적이고 원활하게 임무를 수행할 수 있도록 합니다. 모든 개인의 특수한 요청을 다 반영하기는 어렵겠지만 가능한 한 양성을 배려하는 차원의 다양한 요구를 반영할 수 있는 기본적인 수준을 설정하고 이를 실현하는 것이 이러한 어려움을 극복하는 데 도움이 될 것입니다. 예를 들어 여성 전용 숙소 및 위생시설의 의무화, 현재 여성평화유지군의 비율이 아닌 유엔에서 목표치로 잡은 여성평화유지군의 비율에 비례한 사전 시설 규모 확보, 여성 특화 의료 서비스 제공, 무슬림 여군들을 위한 별도의 기도실과 같은 문화적 특성을 고려한 시설 설계와 같은 기준을 고려해 볼 수 있습니다. 이러한 노력들이 모여 더 많은 여성들이 PKO에 참여하고 그들의 잠재력을 충분히 발휘할 수 있는 더 나은 환경을 만들어갈 수 있을 것입니다. 마지막으로 제가 말씀드리고 싶은 것은 참고할 만한 롤 모델의 부재와 네트워킹의 어려움입니다. 군에서 극소수를 차지하고 있는 저희 여군들에게 성공적인 롤 모델의 존재는 그 자체만으로도 큰 의미가 있습니다. 이는 앞으로 저희가 군 생활을 어떻게 해나갈 것인지, PKO에서 경력을 어떻게 쌓아나갈 것인지를 모색하는 데 큰 힘이 됩니다. 그럼에도 불구하고 여성평화유지군에게 롤 모델을 찾는 것은 쉽지 않습니다. 앞서 말씀드린 바와 같이 저는 크리스틴 룬트 장군의 임명과 여기 계신 문대령님의 존재가 큰 힘이 되고 있습니다. 하지만 많은 여성평화유지군들은 이런 롤 모델을 찾기 어려운 실정입니다. 특히 주목할 점은 대부분의 어린 여성평화유지군들이 아시아나 아프리카에서 파병되고 있음에도 불구하고 이 지역 출신 여성들이 임무단의 지휘부나 DPO의 고위직에 진출하는 사례를 매우 찾아보기 힘들다는 것입니다. 이러한 문제를 극복하기 위해서 여성평화유지군 사이의 네트워킹 강화가 매우 중요합니다. 오늘 이 자리와 같은 포럼이 경험을 공유하고 인적 교류를 이어가는 의미 있는 시작점이 될 수 있습니다. 네트워킹은 여성평화유지군들 사이의 지원 시스템을 구축하고 다른 여성평화유지군들이 겪을 수 있는 어려움을 미리 예측하고 준비하게 할 수 있습니다. 이를 통해 장기적으로는 여군들이 임무단의 중추적인 자리를 맡도록 계속 도전하게 하는 원동력이 될 수 있습니다. 저는 작년 이 포럼을 통해서 앞서 발표해 주셨던 젠 미투어 중령님과 연이 닿을 수 있었습니다. 임무단에서 소소하게 스트레스를 받거나 회의를 느끼거나 할 때마다 젠 중령님께서 저를 격려를 해주셨습니다. 이러한 지원과 지지는 임무단에 익숙치 않은 환경에서 어려움을 겪는 모든 평화유지군에게 필요합니다. 우리나라 국방부도 이런 네트워킹의 중요성을 인식하고 2021년 평화유지 장관회의에서 여성평화유지군 과정의 개최를 공약하였습니다. 그 결과로 오늘 저희는 2회차 포럼과 한국에서 두 번째로 개최된 여성평화유지군 과정 참가자들을 현장에서 만나고 있습니다. 이러한 과정은 단순히 PKO에 필요한 지식과 기술을 훈련시키는 것에 그치지 않고 여성평화유지군들에게 소속감과 자부심, 일치감을 심어주고 참가자들 사이의 네트워크 형성을 촉진하는 한편 경험 많은 선배 여성평화유지군들과의 멘토링 기회를 제공할 수 있습니다. 여기서 더 나아가 추가로 온라인 플랫폼을 통한 상시 네트워킹 및 멘토링 시스템 구축, 성공적인 여성평화유지군의 경험담을 공유하는 것과 같은 정기적인 웹이나 여성평화유지군을 위한 리더십 프로그램 개발 및 운영 등과 같은 것들을 추가로 고려해 볼 수 있겠습니다. 이러한 노력들이 모여 더 많은 여성들이 평화유지 활동에서 성공적인 경력을 쌓고 궁극적으로는 고위직에 진출하여 다음 세대의 롤 모델이 되도록 할 수 있을 것입니다. 저는 지금까지 여성평화유지군들이 현장에서 겪는 어려움들에 대해 말씀드렸지만 분명 이 모든 어려움들은 과거에 비해서 눈에 띄게 개선되고 있습니다. 특히 올해 5월에 UN DPO에서 발효된 PKO에서의 양성평등적 접근 정책은 평화유지 활동에서 양성평등의 가치를 증진하고자 하는 UN의 의지와 노력을 잘 보여주고 있습니다. 이 정책은 오늘 제가 말씀드린 여러 어려움들을 인정하는 한편 모든 평화유지 활동에서의 양성평등적인 접근의 중요성을 강조하고 있습니다. 더불어 임무단의 성공적인 임무 수행을 위해 남성과 여성평화유지군 사이의 평등과 여성평화유지군의 유의미한 참여가 필수적임을 잘 보여주고 있습니다. 그러나 다른 정책과 마찬가지로 정책의 이행이 무엇보다 중요합니다. 이 정책의 채택은 그 자체만으로도 큰 의미를 갖지만 정책은 이행될 때 그 진정한 의미를 갖게 됩니다. 정책이 일상적인 작전 활동에서부터 의사결정 과정에 이르기까지 반영될 수 있도록 하는 정책의 이행은 저희 모두의 과제입니다. 여전히 우리가 해야 될 일은 많이 남아 있습니다. 앞서 말씀드린 모든 제안사항들은 여성평화유지군 개개인이 극복해야 할 과제는 아닙니다. 이러한 제안사항들은 유엔과 회원국, 각국의 군이 관심을 가지고 개선해 나가야 할 사항입니다. 이러한 도전들을 함께 협력하여 극복해 나감으로써 우리는 모든 평화유지군이 좀 더 효과적으로 임무를 수행할 수 있는 환경을 만들어낼 수 있습니다. 가정 친화적인 임무 여건은 남성 평화유지군들 역시 가정을 좀 더 잘 돌볼 수 있는 토대를 마련하게 될 것입니다. 마찬가지로 여성 평화유지군의 기준을 충족하는 생활환경의 개선은 현장에서 전반적인 생활환경을 향상시켜서 모든 평화유지군들이 좀 더 나은 환경에서 임무에 집중할 수 있도록 보장해 줄 것입니다. 더 나아가 저는 여성 평화유지군을 위한 네트워킹이 미래에는 모든 평화유지군들 사이의 네트워킹으로 확대돼서 다양한 경험이 공유되고 더 나은 평화유지 활동을 만드는 데 기여하기를 희망합니다. 마지막으로 앞서 니콜라스 중령님과 위투어 중령님께서 강조해 주신 바와 같이 양성평등은 여성에 한정되어 있는 주제가 아니라 우리 모두에게 해당되는 것임을 말씀드리고 싶습니다. UN 여성기구에서 펼치고 있는 히포시 캠페인이 좋은 예입니다. 남성이 여성을 위해, 여성이 남성을 위해, 그리고 저희 모두가 평화를 위해 힘을 합친다면 해내지 못할 일은 없습니다. 저는 가까운 미래의 현장과 이런 포럼에서 여성평화유지군을 더 많이 만날 수 있기를 바랍니다. 실제로 저희는 이미 변화를 목격하고 있습니다. 5년 전에 저는 서울 안보대와에 여성평화유지군의 참여 확대와 관련된 세션에 참가한 적이 있습니다. 당시에는 모든 발표자분들이 남성분들이어서 왜 여성 참여 확대를 남성 발표자들만 논의를 하고 있나라는 의문을 가진 적이 있었는데 오늘 저희는 5년 사이에 두 명의 여성 발표자와 한 분의 남성 발표자를 모시고 포럼을 진행을 하고 있습니다. 다음 내년도 포럼에서는 현장의 남성평화유지군 역시 포럼에 참석해서 현장에서의 양성평등의 가치를 전달하는 모습을 기대해 보겠습니다. 지금 이 순간에도 평화유지 활동을 모두에게 더 강하고 나은 것으로 만들기 위해 현장과 정책 일선에서 애써주시고 계시는 모든 분들께 경의를 표합니다. 경청해 주셔서 감사합니다. Thank you.
Ask her to kindly deliver her speech in Korean because I know that there are many Korean military officers here. Please kindly understand. Thank you very much. Now we are going to move to the panel discussion time, and we are going to show you a 2-minute video and reset it. So if you need to just grab something from the coffee station, you can do so very quickly. But we'll start the panel discussion in 3 minutes. Okay, everyone, welcome back. I hope that you had enjoyed your brief break. Now we are going to have a moderate discussions with our distinguished speakers. And then we basically try to highlight some of the points that could not be elaborated upon during their speeches. I think everybody agrees that a shorter speech is a little bit better than longer speech. So this is the format of our forum. So I'm going to start with Lieutenant Colonel Lee. You already elaborated quite a bit in your presentation, but I wanted to hear just a little bit further from you. What have been the sort of most pressing challenges that you experienced in the field? And how have you personally sort of overcome or cope, at least, with those challenges? Maybe if you can share a little bit with examples, I think that would be very useful.
Thank you, Ajong. As I mentioned during my speech, I'm single, so I haven't faced any family-related issue, same as my friends in the military. But however, I faced several environmental challenges during the mission, both physical and emotional. For instance, one major challenge for me was about the lack of basic facilities. Whenever I conducted a long-range patrol in the mission, it was almost impossible to find some proper bathroom on the way. So I had to control my water intake and also the food what I take before the long-range patrol, and same as my Thai friend in South Sudan. I also faced the issue related to gender dynamics with colleagues, as Commander Nicholas mentioned during his speech. Gender dynamics very greatly depend on the country and region. So I experienced the inappropriate behaviors from my colleagues, such as sexual jokes or some kind of action related to their personal or private lives. Sometimes they even acted like a rape someone for fun, just for fun. Actually, it was intended for some kind of humorous for everyone, but most of us were really uncomfortable about those kind of jokes. Sometimes those jokes come from some kind of countries we believe that it's a kind of the gender progressive countries, or even from the same country as myself. What's important is that we have a practical solution to address these challenges. For logistical issues, I'd like to share about an example from the UNMISS, South Sudan. Actually, the Thai friend, what I introduced during my speech, she kept reporting about the difficulties they faced during their patrols or their stays out of the base. And also she demonstrated the portable solution to the mission leadership team. So finally, the mission leadership team of the South Sudan decided to procure the portable bathroom, not only for the female officers for the long-range patrol, it's for the all personnel in the mission for long-range patrols. This case teaches us two crucial lessons. First, as a women peacekeeper, we must voice our challenges. Unless we say something about our difficulties or challenges to our MLT, mission leadership team, they never know our difficulties. Second, those in planning and decision-making position must incorporate these considerations into their planning process. And regarding gender dynamics, we must continue to raise awareness and conduct gender-sensitive training. I'm not just talking about the pre-deployment training. It is necessary to continue all the duration for the mission and also even after the mission. And also the establishing clear protocols for handling inappropriate behavior and providing safe spaces for women to speak up without fear of retribution are also key steps. Addressing these challenges will not only improve the experience for female peacekeepers, but also contribute to more effective and harmonious missions overall.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Lee. Jen, I'm just going to mix up the order a little bit, if you kindly allow me, because I think what Lieutenant Colonel Lee just mentioned is very much linked to the concept that you mentioned towards the end of your presentation, add women and stir, because I think maybe that's one of the solutions to some of the problems that Lieutenant Colonel Lee just described. So maybe you can elaborate on that concept a little bit further first.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not the only person in the room to have heard this concept before if you've done any research or undertaken any kind of gender studies. But it's a term that is used by both researchers within the military institutions as well as in civilian academia. That's just basically used to describe the superficial or tokenistic inclusion of women in male-dominated spaces. So, of course, the armed forces, and there's many other industries, globally where they're male-dominated, without actually addressing things like the underlying gendered structures that exist, or those gendered power dynamics and relations between where men dominate in power, or addressing the institutional cultures. So we say add women and stir. So if you can picture a bucket of water and you just chuck in the twigs, that's the women, you stir, you tip it out, and you just hope that everything is going to work and the garden is going to grow. But the problem is that just simply adding women to these male-dominated institutions, and we've seen this, and I've seen it in my very lengthy career, that it doesn't work to actually integrate women into evolving roles like combat or combat support roles without putting in place the institutional structures that are needed to enable them to actually do that successfully. You can't just expect them to, for example, go to sea, which was my experience, and adapt without ever having had some exposure to that environment, particularly as a junior officer. And there were a number of women at that time who failed because they hadn't had the the necessary support to enable them to go and do a job that they previously had not been able to do. So, certainly in military and security institutions, when we talk about add women and stir, it is about just adding women to our institutions without tackling those sort of very masculine institutionalist cultures. So addressing the culture, the organisational culture, or undertaking some form of cultural reform is essential to be done in parallel with gender mainstreaming. And in terms of policy making, adding women and stirring is creating policies without actually undertaking any form of gender-sensitive analysis into the design and implementation of those policies or those programs. And so they're just superficial efforts that overlook the systemic issues that women have and continue to experience.
Thank you so much. Now this nicely leads to my next question for Commander Tyson. In your speech, you powerfully talked about the importance of integrating women, peace, and security agenda into the military and peace operations. I think many of us here gathered here agree in principle that women, peace, and security agenda does matter and is very important. At the same time, to really effectively operationalize it, it's a different game. Many people told me that it's very challenging. So while they accept that this is important at heart, how do we really get this really worked in practice is a bit of a challenging. So maybe you can elaborate, Tyson, how can we really do this? What are some of the approaches that we can take? How can we start to really take this to the ground into our institutions?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a pretty critical question, Ajung, to actually be able to know how do you operationalise women, peace and security so it is not just policy, but it actually becomes effective to how we deliver capability and how we ultimately achieve a mission or a mandate. So in a UN context, we'll talk about the mandate, for example, protection of civilians. Often in military context, we'll talk about the mission and the operational effects and capabilities we're looking to deliver towards that mission. And so in many respects here, the Women, Peace and Security agenda is more than women's participation, the full, equal and meaningful participation of women. That is a key pillar, but there are 4 pillars to the agenda. So the full, equal and meaningful participation of women in all aspects to do with peace and security matters, in terms of their full, equal and meaningful participation in the security sector, in UN peacekeeping, in peace building, in peace negotiation, the engagement of civil society alongside military, the participation of women within national security institutions in civilian roles, and also in governmental roles as well, is important. And that provides, obviously, an effect for a broader nation and indeed a region or the globe to be able to consider security issues from various perspectives. But that's also about the right to non-discrimination. So it's a fundamental human right, the right to non-discrimination, to achieve that. And we ask ourselves, what sort of societies do we want to be? What sort of people do we want to be? And what sort of leaders do we want to be? And we want to be, I want to be a leader that is a leader that advocates for what is right, what is ethical, what is moral and what is just. And I want to be known for that. And so in that respect, when we think about the full, equal and meaningful participation of women, we're thinking really about that in terms of a fundamental right to non-discrimination, to be able to have the same opportunities to do the same thing that their colleagues who are men can do. But there are other aspects of the Women, Peace and Security agenda that where, for example, the security sector looks to operationalise. So if we think about the pillar of prevention. So prevention activities can be integrated into, for example, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance activities. It's a preventative activity to be able to undertake ISR, to be able to understand threat vectors, and also to be able to be able to respond to crisis or conflict in a preventative way to avert that crisis or conflict. And so in that respect, there are many aspects to how we undertake, for example, peacekeeping intelligence or intelligence assessments of an operating environment or a strategic situation, an operational situation or a tactical situation that requires us to understand the full dynamics of the situation. And often when we find our intelligence staff, and from a military perspective, will often consider the threat vectors. And they'll think about the red force, and they'll think about the blue force, and they may also think about partner forces, the green forces. What they often won't consider is that broader aspect of the society as a whole, and they won't have necessarily undertaken a full human terrain assessment, and they won't have considered the men, women, boys and girls in that context and the impact of conflict and fragility upon them. And it behoves us to understand that a military solution or a military victory is not victory in and of itself, because we're actually looking at achieving a military victory, for example, in contexts, in order to build a better peace. Military, the outcome of armed conflict or fighting wars is not the ultimate solution we're looking for. We're actually ultimately aiming to move back to a period of sustained peace. And so there's importance to understand then, okay, what are those impacts? How does that affect people in terms of prevention activities? That also goes then for protection as well. So that's the other pillar of the WPS agenda, protection. So how do we actually better enable our organisations to protect the rights of individuals, to protect men, women, boys and girls, and in particular, how do we protect women and girls who are differentially and disproportionately impacted by armed conflict? And that is certainly a role for not only the military, but broader civil society and a whole of government efforts. And finally, relief and recovery. So relief and recovery relates to then post-conflict through a disarmament, demobilisation, reintegration phase, and also then in terms of rebuilding a nation post a conflict. How do we also consider how we might build a better peace in order to prevent further conflict in the future? So an inclusive peace process, but also to be able to ensure that the needs of men, women, boys and girls, and in particular the needs of women and girls, are considered as part of that peace process, as part of that rebuilding process, and as part of that demobilisation, disarmament, reintegration process. And quite often what we find is that when we have groups of men sitting around the table, negotiating peace, considering those issues, we miss those aspects to what otherwise might be those gender perspectives on how women and girls might need to be considered in those processes. And so, if we actually link back to, if I spoke about prevention, protection, and relief and recovery, if we consider the operational outcomes we're aiming to achieve, again, military victory is not the means and ends in and of itself. We actually will understand then that in order to be more effective, we need to circle back to our participation aspects of our organisations as well to enable full participation in order to enable those other pillars of the agenda. And so that's sort of how I would think about that. And that flows into, in a military context, certainly our intelligence capabilities, then how we undertake detailed planning, and then ultimately how we execute operations. It can certainly be included in terms of how targeting operations are considered and the decisions made around what may or may not be targetable in an armed conflict. We give consideration not just to the immediate military impact or the immediate military advantage gained, but also what the long-term impacts of that will be to both military success, but ultimately to building a better peace. And in that respect there, that's how we look to operationalise women, peace and security, and how we look to then circle back again to understanding full, equal and meaningful participation of women in the security sector, alongside those other key pillars which are talking there about in being inclusive and also to building more sustainable and long-term peace. Because all of the academic research shows us that gender inequality and the lack of empowerment, alongside other social inequalities in a society, are the drivers of conflict. They drive us towards conflict, they also exacerbate or amplify conflict, and they prolong conflict. And so if we can't address those fundamental issues, certainly in terms of both non-international armed conflict, civil wars, and also international armed conflict, then we are not setting ourselves up with a recipe for success.
Thank you so much, Tyson. I think you really highlighted very important things, that this is fundamental to peace and security, definitely. Now, I just want to bring it back to Lieutenant Colonel Lee on this point. What does it actually make a difference when we really operationalize women, peace and security? I mean, the Security Council Resolution 1325, ladies and gentlemen, next year is the 25th anniversary of that historical Security Council resolution. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Lee, in your experience in the field, have you seen some progresses? I mean, the international community has made some efforts, as Tyson outlined. I'm just curious to know if you have actually witnessed some changes in the field because of those efforts.
Since I'm a member of the observer forces in Golan Heights, I'm not just the observer for the peace process. I'm also the observer of what we made or what we evolved in the peacekeeping area for the women. What I observed in the field over the 10 or 12 years is a significant shift in how women peacekeepers are utilized. And this is directly linked to the gender-responsive practices like those highlighted in UN Security Council Resolution 1325. Beyond increasing numbers, one of the most significant and notable changes is that women are no longer confined to specific roles within peacekeeping operations. In the past, the Jen mentioned during her speech, we worked as a kind of engaging with the local women or children or the administrative or logistic roles or for some spying. While actually these were also very important, but they didn't fully leverage the potential of female peacekeepers. Now the change is quite striking. We are seeing more women in leading roles such as platoon leaders and technical positions, including those that require being out of in the field. This shift is not just about increasing the number of female peacekeepers, it's about expanding the range of responsibilities and also leadership opportunity for female peacekeepers. The presence of women in these roles has had a tangible impact on daily operations. Women bring diverse perspectives and approaches, which lead to more inclusive decision-making processes. In many cases, this has improved our interactions with the local populations, especially in cultures where women feel more comfortable engaging with the female peacekeepers. I'd like to talk about a great example of my case in South Sudan. I was one of the staff officer or chief of the Korean contingent, and the Korean contingent developed civil military operations specifically aimed at helping local women improve their lives. We created special vocational programs for local women, giving them the opportunity to learn new skills and participate in programs that provided practical benefits to their communities. These initiatives were successful not only because the programs were designed with the local women in mind, but because women from our contingent played key roles to develop these initiatives. Understanding of local gender dynamics and suggestions allow us to build trust within the community, ensuring the programs were impactful. Additionally, mission leadership has become more receptive to gender-sensitive issues raised from the field. The case of UNMISS I mentioned previously is one of the great examples about the reaction from our mission leadership team. In short, gender-responsive practices promoted by the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 have not only increased the number of women in peacekeeping area, but have also opened up previously unavailable roles. The result is more effective, inclusive peacekeeping force that is better equipped to address the complexity of modern conflict.
Thank you so much. I think what Lieutenant Colonel Lee just mentioned really demonstrates that, what we are doing today even is consensus building. And sometimes, we go to all these conferences and workshops and we talk, and sometimes we wonder to ourselves, right? Does this talking contribute to anything? Does this actually change anything? But actually, I think her example really shows that, yes, it does matter. Because when we talk, when we build consensus, we agree and we make action plans and we make pledges and commitments at the international level, it does make an impact on the field. It may take a while. It may take a while to really trickle down, but it really is meaningful. So I think this really reminds us, all of us, that what we are doing today and what I hope we will continue to do is really meaningful and it will impact the field. Now, this brings me back to Jen, actually. Now, let's talk about a little bit more how we can really do gender mainstreaming effectively. I mean, you already gave us some examples from the Canadian, Australian, and Swedish armed forces. And I know that there are many nations gathered here. Can you maybe just give us a little bit more advice, Jen, based on your research and experiences? How can you really do gender mainstreaming more effectively? Because it's actually quite challenging.
It is. Thanks, Ajung. And I just go back to the last point that you made before you asked me that question, in terms of information sharing, collaboration, these kind of events. So global leadership and collaboration is a really important key takeaway from some of the more successful gender mainstreaming work that has been done around the world, where we come together and learn best practices, where you hear from others, and then if you have the opportunity to be able to go back to your countries and say, look, this is what I've heard. And in fact, that's how I got to do my gender advisor role in Afghanistan, was actually going to a conference and learning all about gender advisors, and this was 10, 12 years ago. And so that's the kind of the networking that we talked about in the leadership and empowerment training we've just done over the last couple of days. And learning from other military organisations and other security institutions about what they're doing. But I guess a key takeaway would be, absolutely you need leadership commitment to the gender mainstreaming agenda, to implement gender mainstreaming. It can't be done at lower levels without some form of authority or institutional authority that actually requires a policy of gender mainstreaming to be embedded into that institution. And that includes a commitment to ensuring that all policies are inclusive of the type of diversity that we're looking for in our institutions. And it's inclusive policies across all aspects of our security institutions, not just the operational or strategic planning space, but across human resources, logistics, communications, intelligence, all the areas that work within our institutions. Another one is around, key takeaways around targeted recruitment and retention strategies. Now, when I mentioned about gender mainstreaming in my speech, I said there are kind of two facets to that. One is gender analysis. So that comes back to the inclusive policies, ensuring that they're gender sensitive and being created through gender analysis, but also the need to address the historical disadvantage that women have experienced in our institutions actually allows for some specific gendered actions and steps that can be taken to rectify that historical discrimination. So, for example, if you are looking to open up combat support or combat roles, and as I spoke before about the need to ensure that there's the support and an institutional culture to support that, the integration of women, that in fact you can have specific policies put in place or specific strategies put in place to increase the representation of women. So targeted recruitment actually requires specific recruiting campaigns that are directed at women, not just the general population, because it's looking to bring women into, categories that or work areas that they may not have been employed before. If you just rely on the same old recruiting process that we've done, forever, you'll always continue to get more men applying than you would women. And if women are not encouraged to join some of these combat roles or technical categories that we want women in, then they'll be sidelined by the sheer numbers of men that will seek to join. I've mentioned the cultural change or reform program, so I won't talk any more about that, other than to say that that's important in terms of appreciating diversity in our organisation. And I'm not just talking about diversity of ethnicity or gender or race. I'm talking about diversity of perspectives and skills and backgrounds. And that's what provides the richness to our institutions if we have that from everybody. A fourth key takeaway is around gender training and education, which has already been mentioned. And I've had a couple of conversations already this morning about how we integrate women, peace and security and gender mainstreaming into our institutions using gender advisors and gender focal points, and how they are a necessity until such time as everybody thinks about gender perspective, gender equality. And that's probably still a fair way off in our military institutions. But we need to start with gender training and gender awareness, gender equality, mainstream through our professional and leadership development, right from recruits through to senior officers need to have some form of training on this issue.
Thank you, Jen. I just want to press on on one more point. I mean, you did talk about culture, but let me just get you to talk about a little bit more about institutional culture reform. I mean, so many people say, "Oh, this is all important. We know we want to do it," but it's the culture, and culture changes take a long time. So sometimes it is used not only as a challenge but also as an excuse, it seems. Maybe you can further elaborate on how can we really do this institutional culture reform that everybody says is so important.
Yeah, perhaps I could use Australia as an example if that's allowed. And speaking mainly from the Royal Australian Navy, we have instituted a cultural reform program as far back as 2009. And that cultural reform program is still going today because we acknowledge that it was never going to be an overnight fix. That cultural reform takes a long time. It takes probably more than one generation to really embed. But as part of that initial cultural reform work, a lot of work was done around workplace behaviour, for example, how we respect people in the workplace, how we the relationships that we develop, valuing different perspectives, valuing men and women equally, and that type of training, that type of cultural reform was embedded into the training system. Every person in the Navy had to go through a workplace behaviour program. We created signature behaviours that aligned with the Navy values, the institutional values, and they were then embedded into the annual performance appraisal system. And so people were being assessed on their ability to uphold the values of the organisation. And there's some ways in which you can see that cultural reform has to be embedded. It starts from the top, and in this case it did, as our Chief of Navy decided that there were too many media reports of inappropriate behaviour by our sailors at home and overseas, and the time had come to address the issue of the treatment of women in the Navy and then later across the Australian Defence Force. And so I would say that certainly the leadership commitment that I mentioned before about gender mainstreaming absolutely has to drive any cultural reform program, but that you do need a cultural reform program if you want to make changes around the integration of women and other marginalised groups. They must demonstrate that commitment visibly, and they need to be held accountable for leadership on this issue. And I'll just give an example. For example, NATO's integration of women, peace and security into its operations actually requires senior officials in operations to provide progress reports to NATO member states on how that is progressing. And internally to our security institutions, in Australia, for example, in terms of implementing our National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, it required a directive from our Chief of Defence Force and our Secretary of Defence to say that this was a body of work that was going to happen and it was going to be integrated across all the divisions and groups within our organisation. I think also the cultural reform helps to redefine our military values, and so we've also gone through over the last few years a period of changing the values of the organisation, but also, as I mentioned before, addressing these we call them hyper-masculine ideals about what combat means. What does combat look like? We still talk about warriors, for example, and that's not very inclusive language for those who may not, for example, be in combat roles. So we need to talk more about capabilities like teamwork and empathy and emotional intelligence and compassion. They're the sorts of attributes that we require from the people now who are deploying on peacekeeping operations. We need to create a new narrative in our organisations through that cultural reform that recognises the strengths of and the diverse leadership skills of men and women and the different perspectives. And then the third thing I'd say about cultural reform is just institutionalising a framework that will enable the integration of gender mainstreaming and women, peace and security. So not only creating the environment where people respect each other and value each other, but creating positions like gender advisors, gender focal points and others who are there to support leadership in making sure that these agendas can be integrated.
Thank you so much. Actually, last month, our UN Women's Center of Excellence hosted a big conference for the private sector, and we talked a lot about how to attract and retain women talent, particularly in industries that are underrepresented. And key theme was exactly about reforming our recruitment processes and also the performance evaluation. Because if you are not recognized, if you're not praised for your extraordinary efforts for inclusivity, then what's the incentive? So that was also very, very key theme that emerged out of our private sector conference. So I think...
Or could I say, if you're not held accountable by poor behaviour and unprofessional behaviour, that's also a problem.
Absolutely. So reward as well as penalization is both important. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that this is something that the private sector is also talking a lot these days. Let me just, we are coming to close, but I just wanted to now go back to Lieutenant Colonel Lee. You talked about a lot the importance of having female role models, and at the same time, there are not that many role models out there, and I'm sure you're struggling a lot with it. Do you have any advice for the participants? I think there are about over 50 women military officers present in this room. When you don't have good role models, what can you do? Can you maybe advise on that?
First of all, I'd like to say that I'm not the senior at all. I'd like to emphasize myself as one of the junior officers in our military, but I have this little more experience than the participants of our course. So for someone who hesitates to join the peacekeeping area, I'd like to say about challenges are real. We are facing so many challenges. Even myself, I miss so many times my comfortable bed in my room, time to time in the mission. But the challenges are real, but also the opportunities and also the leadership roles are also the great chance for us. And also the peacekeeping experience is very unique, and this is only allowed us to do that, the uniformed women officers or uniformed women members in the military. So what's important to remember is that you are not alone. The challenges I mentioned during the speech for the female peacekeepers are recognized, and many of the organizations and institutions are actively working to address them. For instance, the Ministry of National Defense in Korea has been making significant strides to adopt gender-responsive initiative in our peacekeeping policy. I'd like to talk about my pre-deployment training last year. I was really amazed to see more than half of female peacekeepers during our pre-deployment training, especially considering the current percentage of female military personnel in our military. It was a really great achievement in Korean military. It shows that things are changing and there are growing recognition of the vital role women play in peacekeeping. So my advice to someone hesitating to join the peacekeeping is this: be brave and be eager and pursue what you really want. The challenges are real, but so are the opportunities for growth and leadership and making a difference. If we, the women currently serving in the mission, can navigate these challenges, so can you. So it's about believing in your ability and your capability to contribute and knowing that the peacekeeping community is working to make an environment more inclusive for all of us. So take the first step. You will be the next one.
Thank you so much. And it might be a prophecy because I almost said by accident, Lieutenant General Lee. Huh? take this. It might be a prophecy. So, so all the best to you, definitely. Now, before we close, I'm going to ask the final question to Tyson, but let me just recognize men leaders in this room because, you know, I go to all these conferences where we talk about women, and they're only women, and there's like one or two men. How many of you have experienced that? But in this forum, one male participant told me, Ajong, I feel really weird today. Usually, as a military officer, you know, I never felt like I was a minority, but I come into this forum, oh my gosh, I'm a minority. There are not that many men here. But I just tell you, you are in the right place, and we value your participation because you are in the position of the leadership and making of power and making influence. And if you do not care, we are not going to be able to make the changes. So on behalf of the women in this room, may I please thank all the men leaders and the participants in this room for being here and caring about this agenda. So ladies, why don't we just give a warm round of applause to our male participants and leaders? Okay. So on that note, Tyson, so for our he/she, for our male leaders present in this room and also outside, what advice would you like to give? Because you know they might be willing to make an influence, but how can you do this effectively and powerfully? What advice would you like to give?
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say, Ajung, that I'm a little angry that you stole my thunder. Because I was also, as part of my comments here, going to recognise the number of men in the room today and to also congratulate them for being he/she gender champions. And I suppose also I would like to highlight that, again, I'm not the most senior man in the room. And so I think that I will keep my comments to generic terms in terms of, you know, there are other men out there who are doing fantastic and important work. So I'll talk more about sort of what I try to do, and perhaps that might then be persuasive to those men in the room as well. And I suppose my mind has always been about the fundamental importance of having men within the security sector, in particular within militaries and in particular within peacekeeping organisations, be champions for gender equality and for women's empowerment. And in that respect there, my perspective is that it starts with recognising that gender equality and women's empowerment and the women, peace and security agenda, it's not a women's issue, it's a human issue, and it's a critical issue that should be a priority for all of us. In that respect, I've tried to be an active ally, and so I would encourage all those men in the room who are clearly already active allies to encourage other men to also be active allies as they move forward. And this means obviously moving beyond just lip service, moving beyond just policy, but also taking concrete actions. So it's more than just, as Jen has rightly pointed out, adding women and stirring. It's more than box ticking. It is about leading with integrity and leading with purpose. And in that respect there, leading with integrity and purpose links to not only the right to non-discrimination, but also then about how we achieve better operational outcomes and better outcomes towards mission success. In that respect here, Jen's already pointed out how we create a culture of genuine respect and inclusivity, but also of diversity of thought, diversity of action, and diversity of options. And those are three key things, I think, in terms of thought, actions, and so on that are really important for how we might deliver a capability. But it's also about us understanding that when we accept harassment, marginalisation, or the undermining of women, that we accept a standard that we should not be walking past, and indeed it should not be tolerated under any circumstances. Another point that I would raise is that mentorship is really important. And mentorship is about mentoring both other men, but also other women in order to have them be able to fulfil their greatest outcomes and their goals and objectives. And it's about also opening the doors, particularly to those senior men in the room here. It's about opening the doors. It's about making sure that when you are sitting around the table, if there isn't a representation of those women there, that you are the one taking the action and the lead to get those women at the table, not as a tokenistic gesture, but because they have a right to be there, and also because they add capability and effectiveness to the discussion and to the ultimate aim of your objectives. And I think, you know, that in that respect there, this links back to our sort of our discussion around gender equality is not a threat to the position of men in a society. It's not a threat to the position of men within their own organisations. It is actually about building a stronger, more effective team in order to deliver operational capability. When we ignore 50% of the population in a time in which we're in a competition for talent, we've heard about the private sector looking to try and recruit more women and gain talent. You know, militaries are also in a competition for talent against the private sector, against other areas of government, and so we can't afford to ignore highly motivated, articulate, intelligent, and awesome women, frankly, in our organisations. And so when we all stand together for gender equality, we can actually create a military organisation that is more diverse, more capable, and also more resilient. And so, you know, often what I would do in a room where perhaps I had a more difficult group of men, and I had the great privilege often to travel the world representing UN Women and engaging with the security sector and engaging with very, very senior officers at Chief of Defence and Deputy Chief of Defence level and Ministers of Defence around the world. And when I speak with them, I will often ask them the ultimate fundamental question, which is really, what kind of leader do you want to be? And I'm going to now read from my notes to make sure I get it right. But what I often will say is, will you be one that holds on to outdated norms, or will you be the leader who drives change, champions equality, and strengthens your organisation for the future, because it is both right to do and also right for your mission? And that's probably my closing comment.
Thank you so much. I think this discussion has been very rich, and unfortunately we are at the end of our time given. So ladies and gentlemen, please give the final round of applause to our speakers, Lieutenant Colonel Lee, Jen, and Thais. Now, before we close, I'm going to have a very special segment. We mentioned to you that this forum is taking place as a finale to the 3 weeks long training that we just provided for 22 women officers from 13 countries in the Asia Pacific region. Now, as a finale, I actually wanted to invite 2 representatives among the trainees to kindly come forward and to say a word in terms of their experience in Korea for the past 3 weeks. Ladies, please. And I'm doing this because the overall theme of our forum is that it is the right thing to do, and it is an intelligent thing to do for all of us to invest in women. And I think these women will demonstrate that when we invest in women, this is what we get. So,
UN Women, Australian Defence Force Peace Operations Training Center, ROC Peacekeeping Operations Center. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am honored to stand in front of the beautiful people with kindred spirit, and I am humbled to share my reflection from the recent UN Uniformed Women Peacekeepers training. And now, joining the Second Korea Peacekeeping Forum for Women's Empowerment. This experience has shaped my understanding not just the scenarios, planning, and understanding the complexities of the UN mission, but also give me 3 important lessons to bring home: the beauty in diversity, women empowerment and leadership, and learning while enjoying the beauty, place, and food of Korea. First, I learned that diversity is not just a strength. It is a connection that enhances our peacekeeping efforts. Understanding our differences allows us to work more effectively towards a common goal. Secondly, the training emphasized the importance of women empowerment and leadership. Women have a crucial role in peacekeeping efforts. By empowering women, we not only uplift the entire communities, but also pave the way to sustainable peace. It is clear that when women lead, nobody is left behind. Lastly, learning in the vibrant atmosphere of Korea with its distinct culture, delicious food, and added the unique and lovable people, it reminded us that the culture is a cornerstone of community and connection that is vital in our peacekeeping mission. With this, I extend my highest appreciation to our instructors and facilitators. Please stand to be recognized, sirs and moms, the facilitators of this training. Thank you so much. Be seated. For their dedication and excellence, thank you for providing us with the tools, insights, and inspiration to start another different story in the world. Once again, to the Ministry of Defense, UN Women, Australian Defence Force Peace Operations Training Center, ROC Peacekeeping Operations Center, and the most busy facilitators, Colonel Moon, sir, Lieutenant Colonel Kim, sir, Major Lee, ma'am, thank you so much. Mabuhay tayong lahat, and good morning.
Salamat po. Now, Major Ara Cho from the Republic of Korea will say the final.
앞서서 보비 대위가 너무 거창하고 멋지게 소감을 발표하는 바람에 다소 더 떨리긴 하지만 제 소감은 조금 짧습니다. 네, 얼른 발표하도록 하겠습니다. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Major Arajo from the Republic of Korea Army. I'm so happy to meet you all. I'm standing here on behalf of the Uniformed Women Peacekeepers training participants to share my impression on the training course. I have a plan to be deployed as a military observer for UN peacekeeping missions this December, which is why I was able to join the training course and this forum. First and foremost, I'd like to express my gratitude to everyone who prepared the training course and this forum. And it was an honor and pleasure to participate in the course with so many dedicated uniformed women from diverse backgrounds. During the training course, I had the opportunity to engage in meaningful dialogue and share experiences and perspective with fellow women. This allowed me to gain a more comprehensive understanding of key issues as gender, peace and security, as well as inclusive leadership within peacekeeping operations. And it boosted my confidence for my future peacekeeping mission as well. Furthermore, through the course, I acquired valuable insights into the challenges and the opportunities women face in peacekeeping roles. Also, I learned how women can contribute to creating more inclusive and effective peacekeeping operation. This has made me realize the importance of women's individual roles in building more peaceful and equal world. Based on I've learned from the training course, I will do my best from my position to contribute to expanding and developing women's role, not only in UN peacekeeping, but also military operations environment as well. Lastly, I'd like to conclude my presentation with this. Women empower women, empowered women build peace. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the Second Korea Peacekeeping Forum for Women's Empowerment. I know we are a little bit over time. We apologize for this, but I kindly ask for your understanding. And please stay here for lunch. We did order individual lunch for you, so if you registered and you ticked the box, you are obligated to kindly stay with us for lunch if possible. And please network with one another and just have a good time and enjoy the beautiful weather that we have today as well. So we once again, we would just really want to thank you on behalf of UN Women and all the organizers for taking your precious time to be with us today. Now, as the finale, can I invite you to kindly maybe chant with me our slogan, Empower Women, Build Peace, and Peace is Best Kept Together. So if you kindly say this with me, we'll conclude the forum. Okay, so I'll give you 1, 2, 3, and we say this together, okay? 1, 2, 3. Empower women, build peace. Peace is best together. Thank you very much. Okay, while you're waiting for your main course to arrive, there is a slideshow of the photos from the forum as well as from the UWPT program.